I remember when I first came out and I told my mom about it, she was accepting, but it did take her some time to process. And one of the things that she mentioned to me, like once we had already gotten more comfortable with having the conversations, was that her biggest fear was that she was not going to be able to be a grandma, or for me to be able to experience that of like having a family. And here I am with a son.
Great, Ricardo. Thank you so much for being here on Winning Wednesday with me. It's always amazing to have V-teamers on the show, so I really appreciate your time today. So I love to open these up with a personal and professional check-in. If there's anything that you would want to share that the audience might not know about you, that would be great.
Verizon was my first real job, first real job. So I've been with Verizon for about 14 years now. Moved up through the retail world, did a little bit of indirect, and I then came back to retail and leadership. I am proud to announce that I just recently accepted a new position that will be effective on the 13th of this month, and I will be a project manager in charge of employee engagement, volunteering, and recognition for the BCG sales and operations team.
I think you're going to rock that role. And I love that that's happening this month, Pride Month. So that's fantastic. What good timing.
As far as personal goes, I was born in El Salvador, moved to the US when I was about 12, lived most of my life in Houston until I got promoted to be a district manager, where I moved to Austin. And I've been here for a little bit over 3 years now. My husband and I have been married for about 5 years, and my son is 2. He turned 2 in April 15th.
That's awesome. Well, congrats to you and your husband. I think that's amazing. And it's so good to kind of have that support in your life, outside of work, because work can be very taxing. So I really admire people that are living their truths like yourself. And that's really why I wanted to have you on the show, so you can share with us, basically how normal you are, because I think that's not really what gets put out there very often, especially if people don't know or aren't familiar with the LGBTQ plus community. So you just sharing that and normalizing it is really what we need to be surrounded by, I think.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's funny you mentioned that, because I remember when I first came out and I told my mom about it, she was accepting, but it did take her some time to process. And one of the things that she mentioned to me, like once we had already gotten more comfortable with having the conversations, was that her biggest fear was that she was not going to be able to be a grandma, or for me to be able to experience that of like having a family. And here I am with a son.
That's actually how I came across you in the first place. I think it may have even been for your son's birthday. I'm not sure, but you guys had a rainbow cake and Verizon featured you, and I caught wind of it. So what does it mean to you to really be recognized by an employer like that in that capacity?
To get an opportunity to be featured, I certainly don't feel like I'm the person that represents the entire community, by no means. I think I represent my life, and hopefully the way that I live my life and the choices that I've made can help or inspire others to take them similar steps towards like making their choices too. But I feel thankful, I feel happy, I feel proud, and Verizon has been nothing but excellent to me.
I think in my mind, I'm scared to some extent that people that saw me one way and accepted me as a quote unquote professional might look at me differently in the future. It's just that fear in our minds that kind of can keep us from living our authentic selves from time to time. You mentioned that you guys wrote a book. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
When I started thinking about the things that matter to me, where one, I really care about the environment, right? I want to make sure that my son has a place to live in that's healthy, and that that is a world where it doesn't feel too different from where we are now. And then I also cared about LGBTQ plus rights. So then I thought, what about a rainbow bee? The bees are so important. They're like, fundamental to our environment. They take care of about 35% of our food source. So that's a good way for me to start. I was like, a rainbow bee, but I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And then my son, we started reading a lot of books to him, my husband and I, and we realized that he was starting to pay attention to a lot of the words that we were saying. Like he was repeating some of the words and like pointing to some of the things. So we thought, okay, it's important for us to also pick books that have a message that we care for, and that a message that we want him to receive around inclusivity and diversity, and ways to be able to talk about that message without it being too serious. And there weren't that many books that we could find that were easily accessible, certainly not in like bookstores. Some of them were available online that you can find here and there. My husband and I thought, like, why don't we write that book? Like, why don't we write the book that has the message that we want him to hear? And then the journey started there. And it took us about a year to do the book. And it's about a bee who was born different because of the colors, the stripes, and hide, embrace the diversity of rainbow.
children are the perfect audience for a story like that, especially because they don't necessarily have a lot of media that does have representation. And I know you've had involvement with the Trevor Project. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that involvement looks like and maybe even what resources are available and to who directly benefits from that?
One of the opportunities that I saw available through our Involved Self site was the opportunity to become a Trevor suicide prevention counselor and get an opportunity to go through a full training where you learn about some of the ways that you can help someone prevent from suicide ideation. And the amount of knowledge that I gathered just from the training alone, I was so impressed. What I do is I help on a monthly basis. Anyone who is interested in having a conversation, anyone who's having a hard time and wants to talk about it, then I get an opportunity to chat with them and talk about, some of the ways that you can help either minimize risk or consider different options. And certainly if it sounds serious enough, then how do we intervene to hopefully prevent a tragedy from happening. Trevor has so many great resources. I mean, if you go to their site, you'll find so many different ways of, coming out language, how to deal with depression, and then just information, in general that's in the site that talks about suicide prevention for either someone who may be considering or someone in your life that you feel maybe is showing signs.
Thank you for the work that you're doing there, and I appreciate you walking us through that. Within the youth of the LGBTQIA plus community, why are we seeing such an increase and a spike in suicide and suicide ideation? So where do you see that coming from?
At the end of the day, as human beings, we all want to belong, right? And we all want to feel like we're part of a community, that we're accepted, that we're loved. And I think that's just like human nature. Anyone who's like our transgender brothers and sisters, or transgender people, chooses to go through the transition process, which, by the way, not everyone who's transgender chooses to go. There's less understanding around it, right? When we talk about LGBTQ+, most people understand the L and the G, but they don't always understand the rest of the letters. And that, in my opinion, causes them to feel sometimes less understood, and that plays a part in all of that. And then you think of like the environment that we're in now. Maybe their home was their comfort place where like they just showed up to their true self. It's not something they always felt comfortable doing at work. Now they don't have that option because at home they have to work through a camera and they have to show themselves at every time, and it's not necessarily the way that they have always managed their life. So I think that change has also played a part in all that.
And the Trevor Project is specifically a resource for youth, right? Or is it for adults as well?
They'll start at any age, and they go up to 24 years.
Up to 24. I would ask where your passion for it comes from, but I would presume it just comes maybe from being part of the community, unless there was something deeper that got you involved that you would want to share.
Coming from El Salvador, there wasn't a lot of conversation around being gay and the resources, and that made it harder for me to really understand who I was and accept who I was at that age. So when I moved here and I started to have more access to who I may be and understanding more of what like gay means in the community, then it really turned me into the person that I am now. So to be able to have any sort of impact and be able to involve in the process of somebody understanding, having access to resources, feeling more comfortable with who they are as a person, not just by LGBTQ+, like LGBTQ+ happens to be where I start, right, where my life is, but for anyone, right? I take that approach in the workplace where if I can create any sort of way that makes it a more inclusive place for people to work at, I try to create environments where people just feel comfortable sharing who they are. It's that passion around creating that environment because I know what it meant to me and I know how it has helped me in my career and in my life, that I want to be able to do that for others as well.
But why is it, no matter who you are, why is accepting yourself so important that you would say?
You won't be able to feel loved by others unless you find love within yourself, right? You've got to be comfortable with who you are, with the pieces that make up the person that you are, in order to be able to fully expose yourself to someone else and be vulnerable and say, hey, here's how I am, imperfect, but perfect at the same time. And I think that when you do that, then that allows for others to love you, that allows for others to connect to you too, and then you create true relationships there. But it's really hard to do that when you haven't really found that peace within yourself or found that love within yourself.
I wanted to ask you what Pride Month means to you, if there's anything that you really haven't already touched on, and how we can all show up as better allies during this time and even throughout the rest of the year.
Pride Month to me, at one point meant a celebration, right? Hey, here's who I am and I want you to know it. But the more that I've learned about where it started, right, with the riots and with the fight to be treated equally, pride is not just about where we are now, but where we still need to go. And like you think of like worldwide, there's still a number of countries that consider being LGBTQ plus illegal. To me, it's about the fight. It's about where we still need to go to. It's about the efforts that we still need to do to move forward. Anytime that somebody asks me, hey, I want to be an ally, I want to do more, it's like start by like taking the time to learn, like understand what the struggles of the community are, understand what are some of the ways that you can help support it, and don't necessarily expect for the community to teach you about it.
If you want to be contributing either to a community or to a conversation, we shouldn't just go in expecting someone else to explain everything to us, because we don't know where they're coming from. And it could be a very taxing and draining conversation for that person to have. And that's really, like you said, it's just not fair, period. And I like to close these out by asking what your favorite way to win Wednesday is, just in name of the show.
For me, it's all about understanding what are some of the ways that we can already start working to make sure that we're leading with the heart, like we're leading with empathy, we're leading so that people feel like people in the workplace. Because when you do that, that's when you get the best version of who everyone is. And I mean, what better way for us to become the best organization in the world, number one employer, right? Than by making sure that we're creating the best environment for all of our team members, employees, B-teamers, those that work with us. That would be my Winning Wednesday quote for you. Just keep leading with the heart.